Welcome to the Real Estate Power Play Podcast, your launch pad for skyrocketing success in real estate investing. I'm your host, Gabe Rodarty, alongside Mark Monroe. We're ready to bring you transformative stories, groundbreaking strategies, and the insider secrets of real estate giants. Get ready to accelerate your investment journey and become a true power player in the world of real estate.
Welcome to another episode of Real Estate Power Play. I am Mark Monroe, this week's host, and I am super excited to have Kevin on. And we all, especially the way the economy has been shifting in the last few years, affordable housing is really one of the directions where things are tend to going. And Kevin and his team over there at Sunrise, they specialize in mobile home. Hey, Kevin, how you doing?
Mark, I'm excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. Appreciate it. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, kind of give everybody a little bit of a bit background on yourself. I know you guys been in this for quite some time and you have quite a few pads. You guys call them pads or doors? What do you guys call them?
Pads is the way we reference it in our space. Yep. So that could mean doors, but not always.
True, true. So when did you guys start?
So, I guess Sunrise Capital Investors, which is my firm, I founded it back in 2014. However, I've been a full-time real estate investor since basically 2000. I got into it when I was, got introduced to it when I was 19, bought my first rental property and investment when I was 20. I'm 45 today, and so I've been doing it for quite some time. I've over the years, I've owned hundreds of single family homes. That was kind of how I cut my teeth, buying and building a rental portfolio of single family before that was the cool thing to do. That was very much just a fragmented industry. Now it's very much getting consolidated with a lot of larger PE and institutional groups in the space. But that's how I got my start, and then really just evolved from there, Mark, like a lot of these things do. Just always was looking for a more efficient way and a better way to scale and just run a tighter ship and better operations. And that's really, I started venturing into commercial real estate, different types. And I, over the years, I owned just about every type you can imagine, just really trying to figure out which vehicle I felt was the best suited for us. So I've owned still today, industrial, self-storage, medical office, multifamily, retail office, the list goes on and on. But and back in 2011, I got introduced by happenstance to mobile home parks. It was one of those asset classes that, again, wasn't sexy, and it wasn't institutionalized, wasn't in the mainstream. And honestly, it was one I had never considered. It wasn't part of like the major food groups of commercial real estate. And I just happened to meet a guy that, had been in the space for a number of years and just really, he piqued my interest such a great deal over a 2-hour lunch that I left that lunch and basically committed myself to buy a mobile home park. And I did. It took me about a year to buy one. That was back in 2011. And fast forward to today, we've owned and operated mobile home parks in 18 states. I think today we're in 13 states and Northeast, Southeast, and some select Midwestern states. And we love the asset class. It's, again, as you'd mentioned, affordable housing is an incredibly high demand. And I do personally, this is not just me giving the sales pitch, but I feel like mobile home parks truly probably are the best asset class to really fill that void. And we can go into detail as to why I feel that later on the show here, but that's just a quick background. So I've done just about everything, but full-time real estate investor. I always joke and say I've never had a real job. So I'll still stand and be proud about that today.
Wow. Wow. I wish, we say it's not a full-time job, but in a sense it is, but it does give us the flexibility though, of when to do things. And it really comes down to, and I'm sure you have an amazing team. The people on your team help you where you're at, where you run everything. So, let's dive in a little bit more. Let's talk about the affordable housing. I totally agree with you 100%. I mean, that's really, the direction. Look where the rates are. Look at what the cost of since, COVID, in the last couple of years with the housing, it's a major problem and people are struggling. So, talk a little bit about like what you're seeing where you first got into in 2011 and where you're seeing it in today's world and today's environment.
Yeah, I mean, I could speak only to, I'll speak to, mobile home parks and what we've seen, as far as the evolution. I mean, at the end of the day, an affordable housing product was needed back in 2011 just as much as it's needed today. I mean, obviously the, inflation has run rampant now over the past couple of years and things are just incredibly expensive, along with that housing, as well. And so, mobile home parks, you can basically take, I like to say it this way. You could take any one of our parks in any state, any market within the country that we currently own. And I can promise you that it's the It's not the lowest quality housing option because I mean, we still buy in good school districts. We want to be on the right side of town. We want to buy a product that offers a clean, safe, and quiet housing option for our residents. And so put a lot of capital back into, and we've got amenities, things of that nature. But with that being said, take any community we have and put it up against any I guess comparative apartment complex. So if we've got like a B class community, put it up against any B class apartment complex or B class single family rental housing, and ours is going to be roughly 25 to 30% less. And so, and if you're in that respective market and you can't afford to live in one of our communities, then you can't afford to live there because it really is the cheapest housing option that exists in any respective market throughout the country. I mean, you're basically homeless at that time or living in a car. I don't jokingly say that. And so, it's just a great asset class because our communities provide a sense of neighborhoods. We basically run them and operate them like a subdivision. We've got amenities like playgrounds, and some have swimming pools, some have pickleball courts. It just depends on the community and who's living there, the demographic that we're serving. But again, it's great product. Mobile homes have come a long way. Just the mobile homes themselves, the product themselves has come a long way since. Everyone's got a vision of what a mobile home is. And most of us probably think back maybe 20, 30 years, like metal boxes, metal roofs. I mean, these things just like tin cans, right? And kind of haphazardly thrown together. And that's just not the case. They're built to a strict standard. HUD oversees the building process and ultimately puts their stamp of approval on it. And they're built in a controlled environment. And they're basically built nowadays with essentially the same material that a single family stick built home is actually built with. It's just done much more efficiently, given that there's no weather delays or challenges with subs coming on site and showing up on time. You've got these things built in a controlled environment in a warehouse, and typically from beginning to end, a standard size mobile home will be off the assembly line within 3 or 4 days. So it's pretty impressive.
Wow, it has come a long ways. My first,
Yeah.
like you said, you got into it and you did your first deal at 19. My first deal was at 19, and it was a mobile home. Believe
Okay,
it or not.
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
did the old Carlton sheets, the book. I went and got
yep.
cardboard. We buy houses, put them up on a telephone pole, and I got in trouble. Didn't, I was 19. I didn't know any better. And
Code
municipality, go
enforcement.
take those
Yeah.
things down.
Yeah, isn't that funny? That
Yeah.
man, I probably bought more single family homes during my career when I was buying single family from the damn bandit signs and any other method. I mean, we've done billboard, radio, TV, but this is back before pay per click was really a big thing. But all the other traditional marketing and guerrilla marketing methods, but bandit signs, they just used to kill it. And the uglier ones work the best. The
Yeah.
handwritten stuff tend to work better.
They still technically do. You just got to be careful of the areas you put them up because
Yeah.
municipalities nowadays really have an issue with it. Like Hollywood, Florida, I think now down there for every sign that's up, they're going to hit you with a $700 fine per sign. It's
Oh my
just,
gosh.
but
Yeah, they were somewhat strict like that here in a few of the counties on the west coast of Florida where we used to operate in. We just have to, create, forwarding numbers and standalone kind of just LLCs that own the numbers. I mean, like we tried to play the game
headache.
and tried to avoid it. But
Now,
yes,
like you said, PPC is so much easier nowadays. And
yeah,
when you get to another level, your whole marketing strategy just changes
yeah,
compared to when you first start out because you have a certain budget that you have to try to follow. So, do you guys buy existing parks or do you develop
yes,
parks as well? Tell us a little bit because developing
yeah.
parks is kind of challenging depending on where it's at because a lot of municipalities they don't want the parks because
That's
they're
right.
like the bad reputation that they used to have back in the day. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I mean, you hit a valid point. In fact, that point, that supply demand imbalance that exists, and there's really no new inventory, no new parks that are being built. In fact, it's one of the asset classes that has a diminishing supply. So there's more parks that get shut down every year or get redeveloped into a higher, better use if they're in a desirable location where maybe developers come in and going to put retail in or mixed use or something different, right? There's a much higher use for that piece of land. And so it's one of the only asset classes that truly has a diminishing supply. So it creates this weird supply demand imbalance to where there's more and more demand day by day for this asset class, but no new supply. And so we're all kind of fighting for the same things. And so with that being said, we buy existing. We find that in place cash flow and not having to deal with the banging our head against the municipal wall for many years just to get a no over and over again. It's just not worth it. There's too much risk there. And so we buy existing. However, there's been many occasions where we'll expand an existing park. We'll buy a 100 space park, might be able to acquire the adjacent 3 acres of land, 5 acres of land, or maybe it came with it. And we've been very successful with expanding existing communities, maybe adding 30 spaces, 40 spaces, what have you, and driving the revenue from that perspective. But building from the ground up, we have not gone that route. There's a few that do it. It is a business model. It's just one that it just takes a lot. It has a lot more frustration associated with it. Time equals risk in my eyes, and there's a lot of additional time that goes into development. And again, knowing that a lot of municipalities just don't like it. We always get lumped. Mobile home parks tend to get lumped in that bad bucket. Again, everyone's got this perspective of what a mobile home park is and what it attracts. And unfortunately, that perspective typically consists of, drug, sex, rock and roll, the bad element, the people that you don't want to live around, right? And that's just not the case. There are some like that, but there's also apartment complexes like that, single family subdivisions that are like that. And then you got the middle class, and then you got the, the white collar, white executive class neighborhoods. And we've got all that in the mobile home park space. But again, we get lumped in that bad bucket. So we don't go down that road, just too much brain damage to do so. And so we buy existing.
I like it. Yeah. I mean, there's some beautiful parks. I'm here in South Florida. I mean,
Oh,
yes, they've been kind
absolutely.
of like you said, but I mean, some of these parks are just amazing of what they, I mean, it's better than some of these neighborhoods you drive through. I
Yeah,
mean, it's just the
absolutely.
upkeep and,
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you're case in point. I mean, where you're based out of, I mean, there's some gorgeous communities, and a lot of those probably aren't. I wouldn't even classify as affordable housing. In fact, there's typically your standard mobile home park, which they come in different, classifications as far as quality wise, like 1 star to 5 star, 5 star being the nicest. And they all can kind of fall underneath that affordable housing umbrella. But then you've got what you see and what we see in Florida, Arizona. You've got some of these more lifestyle communities. They're not really, they wouldn't get classified in the affordable bucket. They're expensive. Lot rent's $1,500 a month, right? And then they've got ongoing HOA fees. But they also have activities directors. They've got 2 swimming pools. They've got a bus that, transports them to the mall back and forth and to activities. They got shuffleboard. They've got all these things going. And so folks want to live there and be around other folks that are of similar age, but also enjoy similar activities that they do.
I like that. So when you guys go into looking at acquiring an asset, what's your strategy typically? Do you hold it for 5, 7 years? You bring capital partners in. Is it more of like a syndication model? Tell us a little bit about when you find an asset, what you go through that process, and then usually your exit.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I would say it's been somewhat a variety of business plans. Throughout the years we've been buying parks. However, I will say that we always typically go in, and even more so today than maybe when we start buying them a decade or so ago, knowing that this is diminishing supply and that literally we're all, sooner or later, and I'm not going to say it's just going to come to an end because there's always going to be opportunities. There's always going to be folks that mismanage properties and, be opportunities for us to go in and buy and create value. But knowing that there's no new inventory really coming on the market, when we buy an asset, we go in with the mindset that if we buy an asset and it's in a great location and we feel it's an irreplaceable location, that's only going to get better over time, that we like the ability to hold that for as long as we would like. We've gone full cycle on many, many deals. I think 16 or 17 deals now over the past, 7 or 8 years. But really, we go in to be able to identify the best assets, but then really over a couple of years, you get to know the assets intimately, and then you really you tend to be able to determine which ones are the real winners. Out of your portfolio, cherry pick the ones that are like, I knew these were going to be good, but this thing's just knocked it out of the park, right? And so typically what we'll do is we'll sell the ones that are good, but maybe they just don't exceed expectations, right? Or they just haven't fully hit the mark for whatever reason. And then we'll keep the best ones of the batch, get full return of capital back, and then move on and do it again. And so we go full cycle and do recaps on what's necessary to get our return of capital back to our investors, and then like to hold the best ones of the batch for as long as we'd like to hold them. And we like to tell our investors 10 plus years and not be forced or not be held to a time frame of when we have to sell. Because again, every time we sell, we've got to go through the challenging process of finding another one to replace it with. And if you already know the ones you own better than anyone else, any new acquisition, they all got skeletons in the closet, right? And so we like to somewhat limit those skeletons as much as possible. And it's you
I like
really
it.
keep what we have and do the cash out refinance over and over and over again. And again, know that know that our asset class has such a unique barrier to entry in that anywhere we buy, we truly don't have to worry about new competition or new supply opening up in the market. It just doesn't exist, which is interesting. Like it's a very different dynamic than any other asset class. We don't have to worry about
Yes.
that.
Yeah, especially, I mean, I've been following the storage space. I got into a couple deals, but every time we turn around, there's another one popping up, and it's starting. I feel that's going to become a little bit oversaturated in certain markets. You're actually
It
starting to
has
see that.
already. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And again, in due time, that inventory will get absorbed, but it's really hard for the smaller investors, right? Like that have, carrying costs that they didn't put that in the pro forma, right? They didn't underwrite that risk, maybe not enough, right? And it becomes very expensive and ultimately could get to a point to where either they basically did that deal for nothing, no one makes money, or potentially even lose money. So it's yeah, and I think we find ourselves there. I mean, again, I think every other asset class has that risk. Self storage is definitely one that's already felt some pain in different markets. Multifamily in certain sub markets as well has felt that same pain with just new product coming along. Like Phoenix tends to go through these ebbs and flows all the time. Phoenix right now, and a number of the sub markets of Phoenix, I've got some projects I'm personally involved in, and they have. There's a lot of new inventory that had been under construction the last couple of years, and it's being delivered now, a lot of it. And it's going to take time for that to get fully absorbed into that marketplace. And so, who's got the holding power? That's really what it comes down to. Time typically heals all wounds in real estate, but do you have the money to buy yourself the time necessary is the
it's
question.
true. It's true. I'm starting to see it here. Well, actually, I've been seeing it for the last year and a half, 2 years. We're here in Florida, especially when
Mhm.
you take the 95 corridor going from, West Palm Beach up through Jacksonville, all the inventory that you see coming online there in the multifamily world space. And I guess a lot of it's going to become build to rent model over in that market. So, and
Mm,
that's not even cheap for affordable housing now. People trying
no.
to go into that, you know?
Well, you
So
can't, the cost of construction is so high and just the land basis is so high. You truly can't build what most folks would classify as affordable housing. You can't build it unless you get grants or unless you get some type of other subsidies from a government entity. Like you truly, it's not cost effective to build affordable housing. Again, to what would get classified as an affordable monthly or annual payment. It's not possible. It's nearly impossible to do. So,
it's no, I totally, I 100%. So, and it's interesting, we're, a few weeks here, we're going to be a new leader supposedly coming in the office. It's like,
mhm.
how do we, as investors in the real estate game, how do we position ourselves and how do we look at that? You've been in this a long time. A lot of people are still new coming into this in the last few years, since the whole social media and the gurus out there jumping in here and trying to promote all this stuff. So it's kind of, do you look at that a little bit, like how you're going to position yourself with whoever's running in the political environment world?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain degree, and I'd say that a lot of that, at least when we look at stuff like, and we tend to stay away from blue states anyway, but like like that just becomes a bigger emphasis for us, like regulatory changes that might get some legs in certain states, depending on what happens in the Oval Office, right? Like who's going to be in there pushing what. But generally speaking, not a lot, because at the end of the day, and I think this tends to hold true whether it's good times or bad or whatever part of the economy or economic cycle we're in, is that the fundamentals, again, whatever your business model is, if you've got it down packed, you understand your business, like the fundamentals don't really change. They haven't changed. I mean, interest rates have changed, but that just means that we're not buying, we haven't been able to buy as much, right? We're not getting deals to pencil out, but the fundamentals haven't changed. I could, artificially have them make sense on a Excel document or on a pro forma. But again, if we're willing to be honest with ourselves and hold true and be disciplined, the fundamentals haven't changed. So we just kind of stick with what we do and what we know, what's worked for us for many, many years, and just keep rolling with it. So I would say that very few discussions truly revolve around, who ends up making it in an office. Most of it is, let's just continue to stay away from that state or that region, because they've already got some regulatory chatter happening. And if we truly go, blue, then that's going to get probably some additional legs of support. And we just don't want to be there. We've owned in states where rent control, like we owned in New York for many years, had some great assets there, beautiful assets. And we actually owned them when statewide rent control came into play there. And it was horrific. We ended up doing well because we owned them for many years. We had a low basis. But like, that literally is an albatross for anyone that owns there. It's 3% annually. It's crazy. You can't even keep up with the capital needs that are necessary for a property, like ongoing improvements or big CapEx items, when you can only increase it 3% a year. You got to replace roads or infrastructure, water lines, sewer lines. There's no way to actually ever recoup that money from a landlord's perspective. And so you're going to see properties that just can, continually degrade over time. They're just going to go in a downward spiral, and capital's not going to be infused back into them. So I know I got off the rails there a little bit with your question, but generally speaking, no, we just stick to the fundamentals and stay disciplined with what we do.
No, I think that's what you're stating is important, especially people that are investing in some of these states. Especially new investors coming in, they don't know what they don't know. And I like you, I have some property up in in New England. It's a blue state, and my contract used to be $45 an hour. Now it's at $75 an hour. We have to pass that cost on. But they're
Yeah.
like, oh, you know what? The landlords are the ones that's, getting the rich off of this. But in fact, it's not. It's just, it's basic economics. It's what our expenses incur. We have to pass that on. Otherwise, nobody's going to be living in property. We're all going to get foreclosed on, or
Yeah.
there's going to be really run down. So, you know, how are the rates affecting you guys? How are you guys underwriting? What kind of issues do you see
Yeah.
happening that you see, or are you being a little bit creative a little bit more in some of your deals that you're acquiring now because of the rates?
I would say, last year was a phenomenal year for us. It was literally we did about $100 million of acquisitions last year when a lot of other folks weren't buying. And the reason is I've been through this before. I went through '08, lost pretty much my entire business. It was, just a challenging time. I'll leave it at that. And so I didn't want to do it a second time over again. And I didn't feel like I feel like I was a fairly conservative investor back then. So we just become, I kind of lead the ship over here at Sunrise. And so I don't want to go through it again. I don't want to, I didn't want to ever, do deals that I couldn't honestly, tell myself this makes sense, or, put my own capital and investors' capital into it and feel good at night and sleep at night that this deal makes sense. And so we didn't buy a lot in 2020, 2021, 22. In fact, we sold quite a bit. We kind of took advantage of peak pricing and sold assets if we got unsolicited offers and I couldn't make any sense of the offer whatsoever, and knowing the asset better than the person that's buying it, we unloaded a lot. And so I think that just put us in a really good position come last year when, again, rates jumped up, everyone's on the sidelines, people are running damage control, people are just, dealing with floaters or debt maturities. It put us in a position to be able to take advantage of not distressed properties, but there was a number of distressed situations, distressed partnerships, debt maturities that were coming up, and we were able to take advantage of it. So we haven't changed our underwriting. I wouldn't say we've even had to get more creative with the financing. It's just opportunities present themselves, and we were, one of the few maybe in our industry that were actively buying and had the capital to do so, and the confidence from our investors to keep moving forward. So, we underwrite a lot of deals, Mark. I mean, we look at a ton of stuff, and we make a lot of offers, and I'd say, I know we track this soon. I don't have any of the data points, but it's probably like one deal truly gets we truly underwrite 100. Out of that 100 that we fully go through a model on, do a full model on, probably only making offers on like 60 of them, like actually writing an LOI on it. And of those 60, maybe we'll get one or two accepted, something along those lines. So we look at a lot of stuff, and a lot of it just doesn't make sense. A lot of it also is circled back around. In fact, one of the deals truly was a deal that we tried to buy it. It's interesting. So we tried to buy it. It was an institutional owner, tried to buy it. It came to market in 2022. And we were second in line, and we got outbid, and ended up selling for 20, I think 28.9 million is what it was under contract for. And we got a call October of 2022 from the broker. Or wait, is that 23? End of 22, in October 22, that, it's came back around. Guy couldn't close on it. And we ended up closing on it last year, July, but it took July to get there. We ended up closing on it for $15.4 million. It was an institution. It was owned by Invesco, but it was a debt maturity. And they were forced to sell it, not in a great time. It is a performing asset, phenomenal asset. And so, again, a lot of other folks weren't in line to do that. We had to close the cash and close it quickly, and we were able to perform and execute on it. So I don't remember your original question, Mark, but I guess bottom line is our fundamentals haven't changed, and we've continued buying and feel as though like this year's going to turn out to be a great year for us as well. Just picking up some great opportunities when there's just less competition. We're never the highest bidder ever. And so when things were on fire, we were getting outbid. We would never get offers accepted. We weren't being chosen because we weren't aggressive with we weren't putting money hard up front, from day one, which it became the case. I know multifamily, you're very familiar with, that whole game, and we just never participated in that. And I'm kind of glad that we didn't get caught up in that frenzy, because we're in a good position today because of it.
And no, actually, I was just going through some of my data, and I was just explaining with the team that, like you said, 70% of my deals come from follow-up where they originally don't accept the offer that we originally put out there. They come
Yep.
back around 6 months, a year, 2 years later. It's just constantly following up and making sure you have good systems in place on that stuff. So,
Yep.
but a lot of times these guys, they just want an asset so bad they jump into a deal. I'm like, this deal doesn't make sense, especially the Airbnb world. Oh my God, that whole mess. It's oversaturated, all the regulations coming into place, and these guys, oh, you know what, Airbnb is the way to go, and we all seen that wave, and we see what's happening there. So what about when you guys acquire an asset? A lot of times these are park owned homes. I was involved in a deal not too long ago in South Carolina, and there was 108 pads and 58 of them were park owned homes. What do you guys normally do on something like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, number one, we won't underwrite the park owned home income. We'll just put like a shell value on the actual physical mobile home itself, and make that determination of what we're going to pay for that piece of the deal, by what the value of the shell of that home is, and we'll only underwrite the actual lot income. Because I found that over the years that, if you're really honest with yourself as well, especially if you're talking about used mobile homes, if you run them like rentals, there really isn't that much profitability above that lot rent. If you turn it, every 12 to 18 months, you got to go in and do paint and carpet or flooring, and some minor repair, have a month downtime. All that income or that profit that you thought you had is gone. And so really the lot rent is where we make our money. And so we've got historically, we would really try to shy away from communities that had a large park owned home contingent. I would say that anything more than like 10 or 15%, we just would we'd pass on. Number one is that financing used to be very difficult, like getting agency loans on parks that had a lot of park on homes. It's not really doable. They'll do it now, but they still have some kind of thresholds where if it has more than 25% park on homes, you can't get a Fannie or Freddie loan on it. At that point, you got to go to like a bank, and which has, higher rates and full recourse versus non-recourse. And we like to know whatever we buy, we want to know that even if it doesn't fit Fannie or Freddie today, we want to know that there's a clear path to get there. And the only reason, typically, if we buy something today, why it wouldn't fit in Fannie or Freddie's parameters, is because it has too many park-owned homes. So normally, what we do, and we're doing it right now, we've got a pretty big two large communities in Columbus, Ohio. Great, gorgeous communities. The guy infilled a lot of newer homes over the last 10 years. And we bought it. It was 323 sites. 202 of them were park owned homes, all later vintage, though, like nice homes, like nice quality homes. We went with a local bank that we've used many times over and over again. But we've got a clear path. It's a 5-year loan. We've got a clear path. We know we can accomplish it in 3, to where I think we have to convert a total of, I think it was roughly 80 of them, 80 or 85 of these homes over the next 3 years, convert them into home sales. And so we have an internal, we have a couple lenders we work with, and we have a whole system in place. So we're going to convert these as these rentals turn, we'll convert them into home sales and get to the point to where we can put a agency loan in place down the road. But we won't stop that conversion program, because again, in our opinion, number one, you keep your expenses down, the less park owned homes you have. But also number two, you get a stickier resident base. Renters are renters. And I'm not saying that some renters don't stick around for many, many years, but the average is probably 12 to 18 months, if you look at it, and then you've got that downtime. You never get the sense of community. You don't get, renters typically don't put money back into their units. They're not going to put flowers in their front yard. They don't take that sense of, home ownership pride. And so we really like to get it converted to a homeowner model, so that number one, they take pride of ownership, but really number two is that they become stickier. We've got residents in some of our communities that have been there for more than 50 years. And then they've got other relatives that live in the same community. It's just like a neighborhood, a subdivision, right? And like, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. And they pass it down to their kids or sell it to their children. And it's just, for us, that's a better long-term business model than the straight rental model. And I know folks that do the rental and they do great with it, but I'm looking for that longer, stickier resident to stay there for many, many decades.
I see. Yeah, I was looking at some of them, and on this particular one that we're looking at, 70% of their expenses is through the rental.
Yeah.
So they're in that process, like you said, they're just kind of trying to sell them through like a seller financing back to the people living in the property, to try to get rid of those expenses.
Yeah,
Let's
and I
kind of
found that like in that model real quick, and what I also found is like if they're older homes and they've been rentals for a long time, they're used and abused. A lot of these park owners are just mom and pops. They don't infuse the right kind of capital back into these things, and so these things just get beat up and just cobbled back together. Repairs not done correctly, half-assed repairs, and so I found that trying to convert really old homes like that, it's like a 50-50 shot. Like you might find the guy that's renting it and he's like, man, I'd love just to own this thing, right? You want to eliminate the burden from you, let them take over the ownership of it. You just want your lot rent. And that way you get rid of that repairs and maintenance line item. But I found that if the home is old, like really old like that, at some point when a big repair comes up, because it will, they're not going to be able to afford it. They're not going to pay for it. And they're just going to abandon that home. And literally, you're going to get it back anyway. It's going to end up
That's
back in your
true.
pool, and you're going to have to fix it or decide on what you're going to do with it. And so, it's an interesting business, but we scrutinize heavily parks that have a park owned home component, especially if they're older homes. Yeah, anyway. So we'll leave it at that.
No, I like that. So let's kind of shift a little bit, if you don't
Yeah.
mind. Like when you're looking at a deal or you're looking at bringing passive investors in, accredited investors or whatnot, do you have a certain guideline that you're looking for to provide to them in the returns?
Yeah, we do. And we work with accredited investors. We operate under Reg D 506 C's, and you know, and it's changed. Even our waterfall has changed over the last couple of funds. We typically do a fund structure, so we don't do individual deal syndications. We do fund structures. We just launched our fourth fund this past October of 2023. And are currently buying in that now. I think we've raised about 42 million in our current fund and have acquired about 120 million of assets. But our projection this particular fund is 14 to 16% IRR over a 7-year span. Our objective is to get a full return of capital back to our investors within that 5 to 7 year span. I think as it sits today, it's going to be closer to 7 years unless things really take a change in the opposite direction with rates and the ability for us to go recap deals once we're done executing the business plan. That's really what we're shooting for. We've got even the pref classes have changed over the years, whereas 2 funds ago it was a 6 pref, and there was one class. Now we've got 3 classes based on how much capital is invested in the deal, and so it goes anywhere on the low end from an 8 pref to the high end of a 10 pref, right? And then we even have some special one-off classes that we've created for just offering some incentives on some bigger capital raises that we've needed here over the past 4 or 5 months. So dramatic difference from what it was just only a couple of years ago. But we've done full cycle. We've done a full return of capital in our first 2 funds. The first fund, it took us about 30 months to get a full return of capital. We still own assets in that fund. The second one took just under 4 years to get a full return of capital. Still own a couple assets in that fund. Kind of cherry pick the best ones, have a really low basis, have agency debt on them, kind of just letting them ride off into the sunset with cash flow. Our third fund, which we closed out last August, we're still about half of the business plan is complete on the communities that are in there. The other half is at the tail end. However, the recap events, I just don't know when they're going to happen yet. We don't have any loans that are coming due anytime soon. And we're just kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with rates. And we won't be able to start doing a full return of capital in that one until we can start refinancing properties. And there's a number of them that are ripe for the refinance, but we just don't want to jump the gun and put some what I feel would be inferior debt at inferior rates, in the event that they start going down here over the next year or two.
That's some great stuff. So no, it's really good. We're about to wrap it up here. Kevin, is there a question that I didn't ask you that I probably should have asked you that you think would be good for the users or
Yeah,
listeners?
yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, I think in today's world, I think there's a lot of I guess it depending who I'm speaking to, but I mean, if maybe you're a passive investor or someone looking to put capital with other operators, there's been a lot of shakeup over the last couple of years. Again, back to my original point, the fundamentals of the business or just of how things work haven't really changed. And so I think that if you're looking to make a decision to invest capital with another operator, really and you should have done this same thing should have been done many years ago, is that you really got to scrutinize the operator, who the sponsor is, spend the most time doing the due diligence on that, and spend the least amount of time, getting all googly eyed over, these OMs that get pushed out with, just seem to be too good to be true returns and beautiful marketing packages and things like that, and spend the most time and money and resources on actually doing due diligence on the team that's going to be running it, right? It's like kind of the jockey, the jockey that's going to be racing the horse. And I think I think a lot of us just we neglected to do that over the last couple of years, and I think a lot of folks are now coming to realize that maybe they might lose some money, or they have lost some money, or really they didn't hitch up with the right jockey. They chose the wrong one. So that's probably a point I would like to make. I mean, I think that's just so important. I want to make sure that everyone makes the right decisions, right? That it could take so much time and effort to make the money that we've made, right? And we want to invest it wisely and have it compound and grow for us, and so that we can, in turn, live the lifestyle that we choose, pass it on to family, create a legacy for our children, our families. But you can only do that if you make the right decisions up front.
That's a great point. I mean, for the last 10 years prior to that, especially in the multifamily space, you know, even if the operator screws up, the rates were so low enough they could
Yeah.
the mistakes. But now you're really starting to see when there's a screw up, you're actually seeing the results from it now. And we are. And that's why it's
Yeah.
really key to kind of find a great operator that really knows what they're doing, especially if you're putting your capital to work. So, Kevin, I can't, thanks so much for coming on. How can people reach out to you if they want to know a little bit more about you and
Yeah.
how kind of speak to your firm?
Yeah, sure thing. So if you want to come learn what we're doing at Sunrise, you can go to investwithsunrise.com. There you can see our most current offering. We also have a lot of additional resources and details on the site. There's some white pages that we've written on not just mobile home park investments. We also own parking, which we didn't talk about here today, but those are our two investment verticals. But also we're pretty transparent, like deals that we own that we're acquiring. We put up third party reports like appraisals and phase ones and PCA reports and things of that nature, just to give full transparency of not just what we're buying, what it is, what third parties have said it's worth today, but then also our business plans. And then we even include things that we've gone full cycle on, kind of the original business plan, how it ended up, challenges along the way. And so there's some good reading there, some good resources that you can take advantage of. And then outside of that, Mark, kevinbupp.com is my personal site. I also host my commercial real estate investing podcast on there. It's called Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow. But through either one of those sites, you can track me down. And then I've got a pretty unique last name. And so if you go anywhere on social media and just type in my name, you shouldn't have a hard time finding me.
Right. Kevin, I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys all for listening to another episode of Real Estate Power Play. If you like what you hear, like, share, and just reach out if you want anything to know a little bit more about Kevin. We'll also put his information and some links below. So wherever you're listening to this or watching this, you'll be able to find Kevin's information. Thank you guys all so much, and we will talk to you guys soon. Be well.